April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above occupied France, the air is thin, cold, and brutally clear. The sky offers no cover, no softness, only visibility stretching for miles in every direction. This is the realm the Luftwaffe knows best. For nearly 4 years, German fighter pilots have ruled this altitude with a confidence earned through relentless combat. Poland, France, Britain, Russia, they have survived them all. Many have thrived. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermican of Jagdgeschwader 26 banks his Focke-Wulf 190A5 gently, scanning the space below his formation. His aircraft responds instantly, sleek and precise, an extension of his body. The BMW 801 radial engine hums with assurance. Hermican is 26 years old, a veteran in a war that has aged men quickly. He has faced hurricanes, Spitfires, P-40s. He knows what competence looks like in the sky and what weakness looks like too. Then he sees them, 16 aircraft, low and climbing, their silhouettes unmistakable and unfamiliar. They rise slowly, almost laboriously, their wings broad, their fuselages swollen, their profiles thick against the sunlit haze. They do not cut through the air, they push against it. Hermican cannot help himself. He laughs. Flying milk bottles, he says over the radio, the words laced with amusement rather than urgency. Others in the formation echo the sentiment. Some call them beer barrels, some call them pigs. None of the German pilots watching from above feel even a flicker of concern. These are the Americans. Below, struggling upward in tight formation, are 16 Republic P-47 Thunderbolts of the U.S. Army Air Force's 4th Fighter Group. Each aircraft weighs nearly 7 tons when fueled and armed. Each is powered by a massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, its turbo supercharger buried deep within the fuselage, connected by ducting that snakes through the aircraft like industrial plumbing. To German eyes accustomed to slim, purposeful lines, the Thunderbolt appears grotesque, over-engined, overweight, inelegant. It looks wrong. The Luftwaffe pilots have reasons for their contempt. German fighter design has followed a clear philosophy: speed, climb, maneuverability. Every kilogram saved is a weapon, every curve serves performance. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf 190 are tools honed for killing quickly and escaping just as fast. Their pilots are trained to exploit vertical maneuver, tight turns, and aggressive attack profiles. They fight with finesse. The aircraft climbing toward them does not appear to belong to the same conversation. The Americans, for their part, are acutely aware of how they must look. Inside the Thunderbolts, oxygen masks hiss steadily as pilots glance upward, already knowing they are being watched. They feel heavy, they feel slow, the climb rate is unimpressive, especially at lower altitudes. The aircraft responds differently than anything they have flown before, less like a thoroughbred, more like a freight engine strapped to wings. Most of these men are new to combat. The United States has only recently committed its air forces to sustained operations over Europe. While the RAF has years of bitter experience, American doctrine is still theoretical, still hopeful, still untested against a veteran enemy. The P-47 itself is new to the theater, its reputation unsettled, its purpose unclear even to those flying it. The Germans have been fighting since 1939. The Americans have been fighting for exactly 0 days. From above, Hermican watches the Thunderbolts crawl toward altitude and sees confirmation of everything he believes. These aircraft cannot threaten him here. They are too low, too slow, too exposed. He knows the standard procedure: dive from above, fire once, break away. The encounter will be brief. It always is. What none of the Luftwaffe pilots consider, what does not even register as a possibility, is that the American aircraft climbing beneath them is not designed to win this moment. It is designed to survive it. The Luftwaffe's confidence in April 1943 is not arrogance born of ignorance. It is confidence reinforced by data, by victory, by experience. German pilots have learned that wars in the air are decided quickly, violently, and personally. The better pilot in the better aircraft wins, the enemy dies. The survivor lands, refuels, and flies again. This belief has been proven to many times to doubt. The Thunderbolt challenges that belief not by opposing it directly, but by ignoring it altogether. As the German fighters circle, assessing their prey, the Americans continue to climb. Their orders are cautious: maintain formation, reach altitude. Do not chase, do not turn. The pilots grip their controls tightly, acutely aware of their vulnerability. They know they cannot outturn a Focke-Wulf. They know they cannot outclimb a Messerschmitt once the fight becomes vertical. They know they are entering a contest whose rules they do not yet understand. Above them, the Germans prepare to descend. This is the first collision between two entirely different interpretations of air combat. For the Luftwaffe, air war is still personal, tactical, and elegant, a duel refined by years of experience. For the Americans, though they do not yet fully realize it, air war is becoming something else entirely: mechanical, industrial, and brutally repetitive. The Thunderbolt is not an expression of pilot skill, it is an expression of manufacturing logic. It is built to be produced in numbers, it is built to absorb damage. It is built to keep flying when it should not. None of that is visible at 27,000 feet on April 8, 1943. What is visible is bulk, sluggishness, inexperience. The Germans attack with confidence, convinced they are about to teach the newcomers a painful lesson. And in the short term, they are right. The first encounters go badly for the Americans. Thunderbolts are hit, scattered, driven downward. German pilots score kills and return to base with the satisfaction of professionals who have seen nothing to challenge their assumptions. The laughter continues. But beneath the surface of this first engagement, beneath the kill claims, beneath the jokes over the radio, something has shifted. For the first time, the Luftwaffe is not facing an aircraft designed to beat them in a duel. They are facing an aircraft designed to outlast them in a war. They do not know it yet. They cannot know it yet. But the moment those heavy shapes begin climbing into the European sky, the rules have already started to change. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was never meant to be beautiful. It was born not from elegance or tradition, but from fear, specifically, the fear that swept through Washington in the summer of 1940 as German fighters tore across Western Europe. France collapsed in weeks. The Luftwaffe demonstrated not only technical excellence, but an unsettling ability to dominate airspace at altitude. American observers watched with alarm as familiar assumptions about air combat disintegrated. If the United States were drawn into this war, it would face an enemy already perfected by experience. At Republic Aviation, chief designer Alexander Kartveli understood the implications immediately. The U.S. Army Air Forces issued an urgent requirement: a high-altitude interceptor capable of meeting German fighters where they were strongest above 25,000 feet. Speed, firepower, and altitude performance were essential. Range and maneuverability were secondary concerns. Survival, above all, was non-negotiable. Kartveli did not attempt to out-German the Germans. Instead, he abandoned elegance entirely. The result was the XP-47B, an aircraft so large and heavy that many engineers doubted it could fly at all. 65% heavier than its immediate predecessor, it wrapped a massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, one of the most powerful radial engines ever built, inside an airframe swollen to accommodate an equally massive turbo supercharger system. Ducting ran through the fuselage like the veins of an industrial machine. The aircraft's size was not a mistake. It was a requirement. When the XP-47B first lifted off on May 6, 1941, it was immediately clear that Kartveli had created something unprecedented. It was fast in a dive, terrifyingly fast. It was stable at altitude, and it was unforgiving. It will be a dinosaur, Kartveli reportedly admitted, but a dinosaur with good proportions. The metaphor was apt. Like a prehistoric beast, the Thunderbolt was powerful, durable, and unsuited to finesse. It demanded respect from those who attempted to control it, and early on, it demanded blood. Training accidents plagued the program. At Bridgeport, Connecticut, Major Hub Zem's 56th Fighter Group became the proving ground for the P-47 and paid dearly for the privilege. 18 pilots were killed, 41 aircraft were lost. Ground loops snapped landing gear, torque from the enormous propeller flipped inattentive pilots. In steep dives, the aircraft accelerated so rapidly that pilots encountered compressibility, locking control surfaces and plunging the Thunderbolt earthward with no immediate means of recovery. For American pilots trained on lighter, more forgiving aircraft, the P-47 felt hostile. It did not forgive mistakes. It punished impatience. It rewarded only discipline. Many pilots hated it. Some openly questioned whether it belonged in combat at all. Compared to the sleek lines of the Spitfire or the nimble P-40, the Thunderbolt seemed absurd. Even within the U.S. Army Air Forces, skepticism ran deep. Why commit to an aircraft that could not turn tightly, climbed sluggishly at lower altitudes, and weighed more than many bombers? The answer lay not in what the aircraft could do immediately, but in what it could endure. Habsburg, a thoughtful and analytical leader, began to recognize the Thunderbolt's true strengths. He studied German tactics closely, noting how Luftwaffe pilots relied on vertical maneuvering and rapid disengagement. Attempting to match them in turning fights was suicidal. The P-47 would never win that contest, so Zemk rewrote the rules. Altitude was life, speed was survival, discipline was victory. The Thunderbolt, when used correctly, excelled in a narrow but decisive envelope. At high altitude, its turbo-supercharged engine maintained power where German engines began to lose efficiency. In a dive, its weight became an advantage, allowing it to accelerate beyond anything the Luftwaffe possessed. Most importantly, its radial engine and massive airframe could absorb extraordinary damage and continue flying. This was not a dogfighter. As the Thunderbolt reached operational units in Britain in early 1943, it carried with it the scars of this painful evolution. Its reputation preceded it. German intelligence dismissed it as overbuilt and underperforming. Allied pilots whispered about its dangers. The aircraft entered combat burdened by skepticism on all sides. And yet, its design reflected a deeper understanding of the war to come. Unlike Germany, the United States did not need a perfect fighter. It needed a reliable one. It needed an aircraft that average pilots could survive in long enough to gain experience. It needed a machine that could be produced in vast numbers, repaired quickly, and returned to service even after absorbing catastrophic damage. The Thunderbolt embodied American industrial logic. Its 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns were mounted with redundancy in mind. Its systems were separated and armored. Its fuel tanks were self-sealing. Its cockpit was protected. It was designed not to avoid being hit, but to endure being hit repeatedly. This philosophy was alien to the Luftwaffe. By 1943, the Luftwaffe was already bleeding experience. Veteran pilots were irreplaceable, training pipelines strained. Aircraft production struggled under bombing and material shortages. Every loss mattered more than the last. The Thunderbolt did not care about experience, it cared about physics. As more P-47s entered service, their pilots began returning from missions with aircraft that should not have flown at all. Wings torn by cannon fire, fuselages punctured by shrapnel. Engines running despite holes that would have destroyed inline designs. These aircraft landed, were patched, and flew again. Each return flight was a quiet indictment of German assumptions. The dinosaur had survived extinction once already, and now, high over Europe, it was learning how to hunt. The first combat reports from Europe seemed to settle the argument. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, when measured by the standards of traditional air combat, was inferior. It could not outturn a Focke-Wulf 190. It could not outclimb a Messerschmitt Bf 109. At medium altitudes where many engagements naturally developed, it was at a disadvantage in nearly every category that mattered to fighter pilots raised on dogfighting doctrine. The Luftwaffe exploited this with ruthless efficiency. German pilots attacked from below and behind, forcing the Americans into turning engagements they could not win. They baited Thunderbolts into following them downward, then reversed and struck with precision. Cannon shells tore through American formations. Pilots unfamiliar with compressibility dove too steeply and lost control. Others panicked, tightened their turns, and stalled under fire. To seasoned Luftwaffe veterans, the pattern was obvious. The Thunderbolt was meat. Joseph Priller, one of Germany's most accomplished fighter leaders, dismissed the American aircraft with open contempt. "It flies like a truck," he remarked, "turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow." The insult spread quickly through German squadrons, repeated in ready rooms and mess halls as confirmation that the enemy had brought the wrong machine to the wrong war. The numbers appeared to support the mockery. In the first month of combat operations, American units flying the P-47 lost 14 aircraft for just 3 confirmed German losses. To Luftwaffe command, the ratio suggested a familiar outcome: inexperienced opponents, flawed equipment, predictable defeat. Even within Allied circles, confidence wavered. The Royal Air Force, hardened by years of fighting, quietly questioned whether the Americans had misjudged the demands of the European air war. By every visible metric, the Thunderbolt was failing. And yet, beneath the surface of these early encounters, something profoundly dangerous was unfolding, something German intelligence did not see, and German pilots did not feel until it was too late. The Thunderbolts were coming home. Not all of them, of course. Losses were real, and the cost in men and machines was painful. But a growing number of American pilots returned from missions in aircraft that defied comprehension. Thunderbolts limped back to England with entire sections of control surfaces shredded, with wings peppered by 20mm cannon fire, with engines leaking oil and fuel in streams across the fuselage. They should have fallen. They did not. Where a liquid-cooled engine would have seized after a single hit, the Thunderbolt's massive radial continued to turn. Where a lighter airframe would have fractured, the P-47 absorbed the force and stayed intact. Self-sealing fuel tanks swelled shut, armor plates deflected fragments. Redundant systems compensated for damage that would have been fatal in other fighters. Every battered Thunderbolt that landed carried with it a lesson written in metal and blood. This aircraft was not built to avoid damage, it was built to survive it. As American pilots gained experience, their tactics began to shift. The painful lessons of the first encounters were absorbed and codified. Turning fights were abandoned entirely, chases were resisted. The Thunderbolt was kept where it belonged: high, fast, and disciplined. Altitude became obsession. From above 25,000 feet, the P-47 came into its own. The turbo supercharger maintained engine power where German fighters began to struggle. Diving attacks, once feared for their compressibility risks, were now executed with care and training. The Thunderbolt could enter a dive faster than any German aircraft and, just as importantly, pull out of it without structural failure. The aircraft's weight, once a liability, became a weapon. And when the Thunderbolt fired, the effect was immediate and brutal. 8 synchronized .50 caliber Browning machine guns unleashed a torrent of lead unmatched by any single-engine fighter in the European theater. 6,000 rounds per minute converged on a target, tearing through aluminum, steel, and flesh alike. A single burst could saw a wing off a fighter or shred an engine beyond recovery. This was not marksmanship in the traditional sense. It was saturation. German pilots accustomed to brief, precise engagements found themselves facing something new, sustained firepower that did not require perfect positioning. If the Thunderbolt achieved even a fleeting firing solution, the odds shifted violently. Encounters began to change in tone. German pilots reported aircraft that refused to die. They described Thunderbolts that continued flying after absorbing multiple cannon hits. Some complained that American fighters plunged through their formations, fired, and escaped vertically in dives no Focke-Wulf could safely follow. The assumptions that had governed Luftwaffe tactics for years began to fray at the edges. Still, the mockery persisted. Old habits die hard, especially when early success reinforces them. German pilots continued to view the P-47 as inferior, a blunt instrument flown by amateurs. They underestimated how quickly those amateurs were learning and how forgiving their aircraft was of mistakes. Every American pilot who survived an engagement became more dangerous on the next sortie. Every German pilot lost represented experience that could not be replaced. This imbalance was subtle at first, masked by individual victories and confident reports. But war at scale does not care about anecdotes. It cares about trends, and the trend was shifting. The Thunderbolt's greatest strength was not its speed, its altitude performance, or even its firepower. It was time for pilots to learn, time for formations to adapt, time for tactics to evolve without catastrophic attrition. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, was running out of time. By mid-1943, the American fighter force was no longer a curiosity. It was a growing presence, persistent, durable, increasingly lethal. German pilots still won individual engagements, but the cost of doing so was rising. The old certainty that every encounter could be mastered through skill and maneuver was eroding. The Thunderbolt did not need to outfly the Luftwaffe, it needed only to outlast it. And in the skies over Europe, endurance was becoming the deadliest weapon of all. June 26, 1943. The skies over Brittany are deceptively calm. 48 Republic P-47 Thunderbolts are returning from escort duty, their fuel running low, their pilots mentally shifting from combat vigilance to the disciplined routine of the flight home. They have done their job, the bombers are gone. The enemy has not pressed the attack heavily. For many, it feels like a mission survived rather than a battle fought. That illusion shatters in seconds. From above, out of the sun, 16 Focke-Wulf 190s of Jag 26 descend in a perfectly timed strike. Leading them is Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's legendary general of fighters. This is not a chance encounter, it is a textbook ambush, executed by experienced pilots against an enemy formation momentarily vulnerable. The Germans attack with confidence born of habit. Cannon shells streak through the American formation, tracers arc upward. Thunderbolts scatter as pilots instinctively brake. In the chaos, one aircraft falls behind the most dangerous place in the sky, Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson. Johnson is flying near the rear of the formation when the attack begins. He is not unaware. He reacts quickly, pushing his aircraft into evasive maneuvers, but the odds are against him. The German fighters converge with ruthless precision. A burst of cannon fire tears into the Thunderbolt. The canopy shatters, plexiglass explodes inward. Hydraulic fluid sprays across the cockpit. The instrument panel erupts in sparks and smoke. Johnson is hit. Pain flares through his body as fragments tear into him. Oil from the damaged engine coats the windshield, blinding him almost completely. Fire erupts behind the panel, licking at wiring and insulation. The aircraft shudders violently. Control response is growing sluggish and uneven. Instinct takes over. Johnson reaches for the canopy release. He must bail out. At this altitude, 27,000 feet, staying with a crippled aircraft is suicide. The canopy does not move. A 20mm shell has struck the fuselage at precisely the wrong angle, welding the canopy frame shut. Johnson pulls again. Nothing. He is trapped inside an aircraft that is actively trying to kill him. Around him, the fight continues. German fighters flash past, firing again and again into what should already be a falling wreck. Cannon shells rip through wings. Machine gun rounds hammer the fuselage. Any rational assessment would conclude that the Thunderbolt is finished. And yet, impossibly, it keeps flying. The engine still runs. Barely able to see, barely able to breathe, Johnson wrestles the controls and manages to level the aircraft. The fire goes out. Starved of oxygen, the Thunderbolt steadies, wounded but unbroken. The radial engine, damaged and leaking oil, refuses to quit. One of the attacking Focke-Wulfs slides in close, its pilot clearly expecting the American to bail out at any moment. Instead, the P-47 holds course. The German pilot fires again. The Thunderbolt absorbs the hits. Then, suddenly, the German breaks away. Johnson later recalls the moment with disbelief. The enemy pilot had flown close enough to see him wounded, blinded, trapped, close enough to finish the kill easily. Instead, the Focke-Wulf rolled away and disengaged. Why? Because even to a veteran Luftwaffe pilot, the sight was unsettling. The Thunderbolt should not have been flying. Johnson turns west, toward England. He has no forward visibility. He navigates by instinct, by memory, by the faint outlines of wing and horizon visible through oil-smeared glass. Every vibration threatens catastrophic failure. Every minute in the air feels stolen, but minute after minute passes. The English coast appears beneath him. Johnson lowers the landing gear astonished when it responds. He brings the aircraft down hard but intact, skidding to a stop on the runway. Only then does the full extent of the damage become visible. The Thunderbolt has absorbed more than 20 cannon hits. Any other fighter in the European theater would have disintegrated long before reaching land. This one did not. For Johnson, survival is personal, a miracle of endurance and stubbornness. For the Luftwaffe, the implications are far larger. Word spreads quickly through German units. Pilots begin to talk not jokingly now, but with unease. They describe American fighters that will not fall, that soak up punishment and keep fighting. They describe engagements where perfect attacks yield no immediate kill. They describe aircraft that dive away at impossible speeds and return the next day, patched and operational. The laughter that began on April 8 fades. In its place comes calculation. German pilots begin to hesitate. Do they commit to a close attack, knowing the enemy may survive long enough to fire back? Do they pursue a diving Thunderbolt, risking structural failure? Do they expend precious ammunition on an aircraft that may still make it home? These questions did not exist before. The P-47 does not defeat the Luftwaffe in a single battle. It does something more corrosive. It undermines certainty. It introduces doubt into a force that has relied on confidence and experience as its greatest weapons. From this point forward, every encounter carries risk not just of defeat, but of futility. The Thunderbolt does not need to outturn the Germans. It does not need to outclimb them. It does not even need to win every fight. It needs only to survive often enough and kill often enough that the mathematics of war begin to tilt, and tilt they do. By late 1943, the Luftwaffe is no longer fighting a handful of inexperienced Americans. It is fighting an industrial system, one that produces aircraft faster than Germany can destroy them, one that replaces pilots, one that learns, adapts, and persists. The flying milk bottles are everywhere now, and the joke is gone. What remains is the realization that air combat has changed forever. That beauty, finesse, and individual brilliance are no longer enough. That in a modern, industrial war, victory belongs not to what looks superior in the first encounter, but to what can absorb punishment, keep flying, and kill consistently at scale. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt embodies that truth. And in doing so, it marks the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe's dominance in the European sky.